Happy Sakadawa, everyone. Welcome to Buddhist Center. We're so fortunate to be here tonight to be able to hear what Buddha Shakyamuni came to this world to teach us, to show us about ourselves. And I feel just so blessed to have any little bit of information to share with you because of the kindness of Kensur Geshe Wandak Rinpoche and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Geshe Lobsang Gompo and Umzala Aga, and of course Geshe Dorje Damdu La and Jeffrey Hopkins were, able, to have these teachings because of the kindness of these incredible masters. But before I get started, I just want to, say that in the language of the gods, Nagas and Yaksas, and the language of demons and of humans too, and however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. Lai ke dan lu dan nu jin ke zhu bun da dan mi ke nan dan zhu wa gun ji zha nan ji zang ba dan che ke du da ji ju den do. So as I began with, welcome everybody and happy Sakadawa. Sakadawa is a month, but specifically on this day, it's a special day where we celebrate the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing into parinirvana. And why are we saying parinirvana? What is this word parinirvana being used for? Why not just nirvana? When we look at nirvana, there are two types. There's an abiding nirvana and a non-abiding nirvana. And the kind of nirvana that the Buddha has achieved is a non-abiding nirvana, because he or she, but he, in the case of Buddha Shakyamuni, got rid of not only afflictive obstructions that cause one to suffer in cyclic existence, but he got rid of the obstructions to omniscience that keep all of us from being omniscient, keep all of us from being able to be the most helpful guides in the universe for all sentient beings, keep all of us from having bliss, these obstructions to omniscience. And Buddha was so kind to come into our world around 2,600 years ago and show us exactly why it is that we suffer, show us exactly why it is that we can't experience a happiness that never ends, a bliss that never ends. And it wasn't something that the Buddha made up. The Buddha just discovered something about his mind that we all have in common. We have this mind that's in the nature of clear light and unsullied that is stained, but the stains are adventitious. They haven't penetrated the core of this mind that's just clear and knowing. So even though they're holding it in a way that doesn't allow it to have complete love and compassion for all sentient beings and doesn't allow it to have complete omniscience, those stains that aren't allowing those states that we would all crave aren't something that are permanently there and can't be removed. And this is the beautiful thing that the Buddha came to our world to share with us, that we all have a mind. And our mind and our intentions are going to dictate what actual paths of action through our body and our speech we engage in. And the Buddha, came, and if we look at the very beginning of the Dharmapada, the most ancient sayings of Lord Buddha, the Buddha came to show us how to do something very specific. The Buddha said that mind is the chief and precedes them all. With an impure mind, one acts or speaks, miseries follow like a cart following the ox. Then he said, mind is the chief and precedes them all. With a pure mind, one acts or speaks, happiness follows like a shadow and never leaves. So here the Buddha came to say that basically we have to try to abandon all forms of negativity, abandon evil, engage in perfect virtuous actions, and subdue our mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. So this is what Buddha came to show us how to do, to subdue our mind, abandon evil, engage in perfect virtuous actions. But the Buddha was working with a system that had never heard this kind of information before. This was revolutionary. We were looking at the time in India. We have caste system. We have beliefs where people have karma that's irreversible and there's no way that they can become enlightened. There's no way that, that there's only certain types of people who can practice certain types of spiritual traditions. But the Buddha came and said, no, this is rubbish. Everyone has the same exact potential, because everyone has this mind that's not naturally sullied, not naturally stained, not naturally bad. Because when the mind is intending bad things, then suffering follows like a cart follows an ox. And when the mind is intending to do virtuous things, then happiness follows like a shadow that never leaves. So when we see in Tsongkhapa's text, that our deeds follow closely behind, as certain as our shadow. So they're always with us. And Tsongkhapa is, if we're looking at where are all these things that Tsongkhapa and Sakyapandita said and Padmasambhava said, where do they all come from? We can get so sectarian. The Karmapas, where, did they invent this stuff? No, this all came from Buddha Shakyamuni, passed down through the Nalanda Pandits to these incredible teachers in the four Tibetan Buddhist traditions that we study under. But it was because of the kindness of Buddha Shakyamuni that he came and he taught a path in such a way that everybody could learn how to transform his or her mind from the state of imperfection like mine abides in, into a state of perfection that's irreversible, perfect, complete, has all of these qualities about it that my mind doesn't have at this point. So the Buddha, in order for us to truly admire the being Buddha Shakyamuni, we must know what this kind of being is. What did Buddha Shakyamuni realize? What differentiates Buddha Shakyamuni from us? We both have a mind that's empty of intrinsic existence, and that's why we can achieve the state that Buddha can achieve. And that's why Buddha achieved the state that he achieved. So we have this mind that has the potential to be transformed. So what is it that we have to do in order to transform this mind? What is this pathway that we have to undergo? What is different from our mind than the Buddha's mind? So my mind is never satisfied. My mind thinks it's going to be happy and then tells my body and my speech to do all kinds of stuff that will make me happy. And then I land again and again and again in a state of dissatisfaction, in a state of suffering, in a state that isn't matching up to, isn't meeting the expectations I have about the thing that I made my body and my speech kind of chase after, because my mind decided that it was really, really, really worthwhile. So my mind does this. My mind grasps at the I, self, a person, phenomena as being inherently existent, and then makes kind of all of these bad decisions based on an inappropriate attention to a false thing, a false premise. And then that inappropriate attention causes me to become attached. It causes me to hate. It causes me to be prideful. It causes me to be so scattered. It causes me to, neutrally feel that everything inherently exists and should be at any moment, if I decide for it to be based on my inappropriate attention, an object that's worthy of my attachment or hatred based on whether I think it's pleasant or unpleasant. So then, based on all of this mess that my mind's doing, I then engage in non-virtuous and contaminated virtuous actions. I engage in these things because I'm coming from the premise that's wrong in the first place. I have decided something about myself and everything else that isn't me that is wrong. And then I've differentiated myself and other, and I make decisions based on, okay, this is me. I need to cherish myself more than I cherish you. So then I act in all kinds of preposterous ways. And all of these preposterous ways that I act in cause me to, in the future, have to suffer again. And this is what perpetuates the state of existence that I've been in since beginningless time. So this is my current state. I have the suffering of aging. I have the suffering of sickness. I will have the suffering of death. I've suffered separation from things that I didn't want to be separated from. I've had to suffer the, meeting with things that I didn't want to meet with. I constantly don't get what I want. And I have this body and mind that's just, I've been forced into, and it's the kind of those that suffer. So that's my current state: uncertainty, fear, dissatisfaction, self-centered attitude. I have glimpses of what love and caring about others can feel like, and it's when I feel the best, but I don't seem to be able to convince myself that it makes sense for me to react to everyone else that way, because I cherish myself more than others, because I separate myself out first and decide, okay, I have a consciousness as mine, and then I find someone that I say that this is the object of the mind that loves. And the difference that the Buddha has is that the Buddha doesn't discriminate in that biased way. So we just kind of came up with what makes Jeff, what makes me tick, how I act and behave, why I act and behave like that, and what the results of my actions and actions have been over and over and over again. They haven't led to what they're supposed to lead to in my mind. And it's because it's all coming from my mind. There's externality that we all agree upon, but the taste, the flavor, the nuance, it's all coming from the subject. It's all, the name is coming from the subject even. So we're not able to find any objective existence in our self of persons or phenomena, yet we believe that it's there. And by believing that it's there, we then have our own personal mix of ways we suffer in relation to everything around us. And this is just our current state. And I think if you're really honest with yourself and you look at your life and you look at what the Buddha said suffering is, the 8 sufferings, the 6 sufferings, the 3 sufferings, the Buddha didn't, many of the things the Buddha said were very subtle, but many of the things the Buddha said were very, very realistic and conventionally established, and that we all just agree upon. This is why the Buddha's had such a good selling, pitch to the world, because we all go through exactly what the Buddha points out. And the Buddha points out subtlety within what we go through that we think is happiness, and says that it's actually suffering. And when we start to look at what the Buddha is positing as suffering, we see why we have this hum of dissatisfaction all of the time. Because what we think is happiness isn't happiness, because it's been caused by contaminated virtue in the past. It's been caused by something blind. We've done good things, but we've been blindly doing them and seeing the action, the agent, and the object as having an inherent existence from an apprehension and an appearance perspective. So this is what we've been doing. And that's what the Buddha had been doing. This is the thing Rinpoche had to tell us over and over again, that the Buddha was just like us. So this is the thing we have to understand. This is the Buddha nature. When we talk about Buddha nature, the emptiness of our mind, the Buddha was just like us. When I say just like, the ingredients of the Buddha's mind were the same exact ingredients of our mind that made Buddha able to be Buddha, to wake up from the sleep of ignorance. The Buddha had stains that were not part of the nature of the mind, that had never penetrated the true nature of the mind. And the Buddha figured out how to remove them. So now let's get to the Buddha. The Buddha has figured out how to get rid of all 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering for himself. So the Buddha is free from what we call samsara, korwa. The Buddha is never forced into a set of contaminated aggregates ever again. The Buddha is never, ever, having to experience uncertainty ever again, loss, separation. These things happen The Buddha can witness these things happening conventionally and love every single sentient being from the depth of his or her heart, and have compassion for every single sentient being from the depth of his or her heart, in the same way we would for anyone we can think of that we love that much or care about that much. But he doesn't experience suffering. She doesn't experience suffering. Experiences bliss because of the capacity that he or she has to do something about the problem. We go, we have no idea what to do about the problem. The Buddha sees these things happening and knows exactly what to do with the problem, knows exactly why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. Why? Because the Buddha experienced exactly what we're experiencing. And when he became enlightened, saw every one of his lives. And we will too. So we have this incredible, reliable guide who, like if we wanted to go to New York from Connecticut, and we'd never been there in our entire lives, we have somebody who's done the commute for like 50 years. We could hop in their car. We'd know exactly how to get there because they know exactly how to do it. So what we're looking for is someone who knows how to do exactly what we want to do. So check one box here. I suffer over and over. 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 types of suffering. I have that. The Buddha doesn't have that. There's a differentiating quality. Why? The Buddha has removed the afflictive obstructions or the afflictive obscurations. I have not. What are the afflictive obscurations? Really, it's the self-grasping ignorance. The afflictive obscurations, what are they? The contaminated karmas and the afflictions and their active seeds. The self-grasping ignorance. Grasping at phenomena as being inherently existent. The Buddha no longer has that apprehension that we have of things being inherently existent. It's finished forever. Never again will he or she apprehend it as such. Samsara has no beginning but has an end. Nirvana has a beginning but has no end. The Buddha will never, ever experience things to apprehend them to be inherently existent again because the afflictive obstructions are gone. Just like a foe destroyer, a hearer, solitary realizer, foe destroyer won't apprehend them as being truly existent, inherently existent again. Nirvana has no end, but has a beginning. What's the beginning? Well, nirvana, we talked about in the very beginning of the class, there's an abiding nirvana and a non-abiding nirvana. Let's not get in the weeds. Both of those kinds of things have a beginning and never end. Hearers and solitary realizers in the individual liberation vehicle have an abiding nirvana, and the Buddhas have a non-abiding nirvana. But we aren't at the non-abiding nirvana part of the story yet. But we'll get there. So the Buddha doesn't suffer ever again because the afflictive obstructions are gone. An arhat, a hearer, a solitary realizer, arhat, never ever has to suffer again because the self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to the truth of suffering is no longer there. The first link of the 12 links of dependent origination has been chopped out so that no more, they can't roll any further. The wheel won't go. The first link's not there. There's no second link. There's no second link. There's no third link. The link won't go. So this root that causes the samsara isn't there because the afflictive obstructions are gone. Why isn't it there? Why are the afflictive obstructions gone? Because that which gives rise to the afflictive obstructions is gone. The self-grasping ignorance, seeing phenomena as being inherently existent in terms of apprehension is gone because they've gone through various pathways and gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions, depending on if we're talking about solitary hearers, solitary realizers, or the bodhisattva. So now the other thing that the Buddha has, so I don't want to suffer ever again. And I know what suffering is, and it's pretty horrible. I don't want to do that. I would like that. Every day of my life, I try to not suffer. Somehow I try everything I do. I try to make it so I don't suffer. And the Buddha's figured out how to permanently not suffer. And then secondly, The Buddha has figured out how to have the complete perfection of his needs, qualities. Whereas if only the afflictive obstructions are gone, then one has not perfected their potential. So the Buddha not only gets rid of the afflictive obstructions, but gets rid of the obstructions to omniscience. And this is what's special about the Buddha and differentiates him or her from a hearer, solitary realizer, foe destroyer, and a Buddha, foe destroyer. Buddha is a foe destroyer too. A lot of people don't know what these terms mean, but Buddha is also a foe destroyer, but he's a Mahayana foe destroyer. There's Hinayana foe destroyer. This is the term, sorry. And it's hearer, solitary realizer, have gotten rid of the foe of the afflictive obstructions. So here a solitary realizer, foe destroyer, have destroyed the foe of the afflictive obstructions. But the Mahayana foe destroyer has not only destroyed the foe of the afflictive obstructions, but the foe of the obstructions to omniscience also. So we say foe destroyer, a lot of people think this only refers to the individual liberation vehicle, but the Buddha is a foe destroyer. So what's the difference now? We're going back to it. So Mahayana foe destroyer versus the individual liberation vehicle, the individual vehicles, Hinayana vehicle foe destroyer. Well, like we said, the hearers and solitary realizers have gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions, have gotten rid of the self-grasping ignorance, but there's still stains that since beginningless time, these stains, these imprints, since beginningless time, have been firmly planted in our continuum because of this beginningless attachment to things being intrinsically existent. And these imprints then give rise to dualistic appearances that make us see that things intrinsically exist when they do not. So what's different about when I'm saying, okay, there's apprehension of things being truly existent versus appearance of things being truly existent? Well, the Buddha is the only being who's not only gotten rid of the apprehension of things being truly existent, because the Arhat knows, has seen emptiness over and over again and has gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions. And when dwelling in the ultimate truth of nirvana, he or she has no appearance of true existence that occurs. But when they come out of the direct perception of the ultimate, they know everything's not truly existent. Like if you put on blue glasses and you look at a mountain and it's blue, they know they have on blue glasses. But everything appears to be truly existent still, because there's still stains left called obstructions to omniscience that are the latent predispositions of the afflictive obstructions, inactive stains that are there that cause things to appear as inherently existent. So within this, we have the subtle self-cherishing attitude, which is packed into this. And the subtle self-cherishing attitude and the stains of self-grasping ignorance keep one from being able to realize conventional and ultimate truths simultaneously. So you can either see the ultimate truth if you've gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions, you can either see the ultimate truth or know the ultimate truth while you're know the ultimate truth is true, but then seeing conventional truth as appearing truly existent. The Buddha sees all appearances as not having inherent existence. So there's not only the grasping at true existence is gone, but the appearance of true existence is gone for a Buddha. And that makes it so his or her mind can expand to all phenomena. There's no subtle self-cherishing attitude that keeps the mind from expanding to every single sentient being in the universe. And obviously, we're not going to be able to, in the next half hour, give a class on how all this occurs. But I encourage you to all study this because it's all logically posited. How the mind is so knotted up and so tight. And it has this self-grasping ignorance, and I cherish myself more than others in such a gross way. But then if I engage in a path that's just for myself to be free, even though I see the selflessness of person and the coarse self-cherishing attitude just would go away naturally if self-grasping ignorance isn't there. Because one hasn't figured out how to expand the mind to all beings, there's an imperfect happiness that's occurring if one doesn't get rid of the obstructions to omniscience. There's an imperfect happiness. Why? Because in order for us to achieve the most amount of happiness possible, the Buddha discovered the next part. The Buddha discovered how to be free from suffering forever. Self-grasping ignorance causes your suffering. The Buddha also figured out how to have bliss forever and how to be of most service to all sentient beings forever. And this was through getting rid of the attitude that wanted personal liberation for oneself alone and taking on the attitude that, as it says in Maitreya's Abhisama Alamkara, wishing for perfect enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So the Buddha realized this secret that when somebody experiences the most amount of happiness, it's generally in times where intense amount of love or something that's like this is occurring. And the common example is when someone has a child and holds it in their hands for the first moment, and this bliss comes over them that they've never experienced before. And it's this subtle flash, like the first chapter of Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, where it says it's like a flash of lightning in the dark. There's a moment of truth that's expressed to us by our mind that shows us, just for a moment, if we analyze it, that putting some other being's need before our own and wishing that they have happiness and that they never have to suffer is the way to feel the best we possibly can. So the Buddha discovered this secret and then said, if I can feel that way in relation to a being, then imagine how I would feel in relation to every being in the universe if that kind of discrimination occurred where I saw them as someone who made me feel that way. Then my intention towards them would change completely if I saw every being in the universe in this way. And this was the secret, that the Buddha realized that one has to rely upon all beings in the universe to achieve perfection, and that one has to undo even the most subtle level of self-cherishing attitude, of miserliness, in order to achieve one's own true state of perfection. So the Buddha was able to realize that by uniting this desire to want to get out of suffering with the desire to want to get everybody out of suffering, with very, very subdued mind, with the wisdom realizing emptiness, one could achieve the state of perfection, have this perfect quality of a body with 32 major marks and 80 minor marks that are all manifestations of perfect actions and perfect wisdoms that the Buddha achieved. Just incredible. This incredible speech that the Buddha has because of not having any barriers, because the mind can just freely flow, because the Buddha achieves this omniscient state. The Buddha is able to speak, as we talk about, from the Sanchim Molan in the language of all, and be able to answer all sentient beings' questions simultaneously that they have in their own individual languages with the utterance of just one expression. The Buddha has this quality of speech, these 60 melodious qualities that are just amazing. And I encourage you to all study this. I go for refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We need to know what the Buddha is. Who is this being that we feel has transformed so much that they've become the being we want to become? What does this being have? What are these qualities? Why is this being so incredible? And when we study the great texts, and we study the Abhisammalamkara, we study the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa, we start to understand these excellent qualities of the body, excellent qualities of speech, excellent qualities of mind. The Buddha has this incredible mind that cares for all sentient beings, as I said, because of realizing that was the trick to permanent bliss, was permanently wanting to, meaning always, never endingly, wanting sentient beings to have the state of bliss that the Buddha achieved. So the Buddha never stops wanting the best for everyone. And the Bodhisattva wants to become someone who knows exactly how to show everyone how to become their best. And we're so lucky that these Bodhisattvas, these incredible Buddhas, come to this world and teach us exactly what we need to know, because they care about us so much. They have so much love for us. They have so much compassion for us. They have this incredible, special, just mind that we couldn't even imagine. But when we think about if the person we love the most was falling off a cliff and we knew exactly how to make sure that they wouldn't fall and die, we would be able to calmly just make that happen, and we would make that happen. And the Buddha knows exactly how and exactly what we need to do to achieve the state that he's achieved, and has so much love and compassion for us because of the Bodhisattva path, because of practicing what we're trying to practice, because of practicing the 7-point cause and effect passed down. Why do we know about the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment? Because the Buddha knew we would need to have bodhicitta, which is the only entrance into the path to omniscience. So the Buddha taught it then, passed it down to Maitreya Sangha, and then down to all these holy masters to us. The Buddha knew there were all these different aptitudes in minds, and there were different techniques that would work and enhance our minds. And the Buddha knew bodhicitta was so important, that caring for others, this special quality of mind the Buddha has, was so important that he then taught Manjushri, the equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, passed down to Nagarjuna all the way, and then to Shantideva and so forth. And then all of these other nuanced instructions where the combining of these two practices are given by masters who were predicted to come by Buddha, Shakyamuni. So we always have to make sure that at the forefront, we keep Buddha Shakyamuni, to know that it's this loving and caring attitude that the Buddha had that gets the teachings to us right now. And the teachings that we learn are just the recipe Buddha wrote down to make a Buddha. And why did he know how to do it? Because he cooked one himself. He cooked himself into one. And as he was doing it, he took notes, not in a book. I know the Buddha didn't write stuff out. I get it. But, noted it. And the Buddha's omniscient, so he doesn't forget. So he doesn't need a notebook, right? So the Buddha knows all the past lives. So the notebook's not necessary. So the Buddha has this great love and compassion, and can see all your past lives and can see your future lives too. Looking at the Lotus Sutra, he predicts, Shariputra, you will be a Buddha then, and you'll be a Buddha then. And, makes all these incredible predictions because of being able to understand the imprints of sentient beings at such a subtle level. To be able to understand the workings of karma at such a subtle level. Now we move on to my next point. The Buddha has this excellent quality of being able to know reality and diversity simultaneously, conventional and ultimate truth simultaneously. We find this right in the Lamrim Chemo. So if you open your Lamrim Chemo to going for refuge and the qualities of the Buddha, you're going to find the excellent qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, mind. and enlightened activities. So the mind has this incredible caring for others. The mind has this incredible ability to see ultimate and conventional reality at the same time. There's no barrier whatsoever. The Buddha is omniscient. The Buddha is dwelling in the Dharmakaya, which is the cessation of suffering. It's irreversible. It's perfect. It doesn't need any more. It's fully developed and abides there in bliss, has this, abiding there, and this wisdom, this wisdom Dharmakaya that's able to know everything about all sentient beings. And then, because of being able to know what everyone needs, then the Buddha reacts because of caring so much for others. And the Buddha spontaneously reacts. When we look at how the Buddha relates to beings and how the Buddha happens to react, the Buddha has no choice. That sounds so strange, right? The Buddha doesn't have a choice but to react for the needs of others. But when we start to look at how the Buddha became a Buddha, we see that it came about through a bodhisattva path where one is vowed to work for the needs of all sentient beings. All the good qualities come from caring for others. All negative qualities come from caring for ourselves. The Buddhas care for others. We care for ourselves. Look at the difference, Shantideva says. I mean, it's so obvious. And the Buddhas have made this pact that they will come and help. So what? So the Buddha has a great mind, knows everything, and is in bliss and in peace. But then how does that help you and me? Well, the Buddha has this incredible next part where they have enlightened activities, where they can send bodies to Arya Bodhisattvas who are almost there, unlike me, to special pure places, the Akadnishta Pure Land, Ungmin, and also can send bodies like Buddha Shakyamuni, depending on how you relate to the life story of Buddha Shakyamuni. Buddha Shakyamuni in the High Mahayana teaching was an emanation already of a Buddha, just showing us how to do what we need to know how to do. But the Buddha can emanate as a bridge if we need one. So if it's going to help us learn what the truth of suchness is, this is what the Buddha's qualities are. This is what the Buddha can do. And this is what's just so amazing. And when I read the Lamrim Chemo and look at the qualities that the Buddha has, and then I look at my body, speech, and mind, I look at the Buddha's body, speech, and mind, and I look at my activities, then I look at enlightened activities. Wow, what a big difference. What a big difference. And the thing that's so amazing is the Buddha was just like me. It's not, oh, I could become kind of like him. My mind could become kind of like that. No, my mind could operate just like a Buddha's. The only difference is the Buddha put the work in. I haven't put in all the work necessary. But we're all putting in the work. We're fighting the robber, that's in our house, that's stealing all our pleasure. We're fighting that robber. We just haven't kicked him out and locked the door. Well, we're fighting them, and we will defeat them if we use the karate instructions given by Buddha. We will defeat them. But if we go on our own kind of way and think we can make it up, we will never, ever defeat this thing we've never defeated in our lives, this self-grasping, ignorant, self-cherishing attitude. We never will. It says in here, the good qualities, let's see here. The good qualities of caring. Let me just read a little bit about the caring qualities of the Buddha from the Lamrim Chemo. In the same way that living beings are bound inescapably by the affliction, so is the sage bound by great compassion. So the Buddha is just spontaneously, without even thinking about it, because of omniscience, knowing exactly what every being in the universe needs. This is a lot to think about, I know. You start to think about it and you're like, come on. This is more unbelievable than anything I've ever heard. The Buddha has this omniscience and just cares so much about every single living being and is bound by the compassion that he or she generated in order to become a bodhisattva and enhanced on the bodhisattva path. which thus arises continuously as he beholds the suffering of living beings. So this compassion just flows. It doesn't stop. It's continuous. And when we get compassion for one being. And it's there for the moment it's going. It's flowing continuously. Oh, I want you to not suffer. I want you to not suffer. Well, the Buddha has that, but no disturbance of the mind alongside it. I don't want you to suffer. And I have disturbance of the mind alongside of it because I have no idea how to make you not suffer. I just don't want you to. The Buddha has complete confidence and complete wisdom and doesn't have blind compassion because he recognizes there's a sentient being that's impermanent and empty of inherent existence. Not so much to get so worked up about. Only something to undo, says the Buddha. Just something to fix. And I know exactly how to fix it, no problem. And the Buddha's not looking at fixing it tomorrow because the Buddha knows the imprints and knows that the Buddha can't wash away the sins with water or remove your negativities with his hands, give you realizations. The Buddha knows he can only teach the truth of suchness. And we've all, since beginningless time, had a lot of different teachers and a lot of different teachings. And in this life, acquired a lot of wrong views. And we have to undo a lot of different things. And we have our own little potpourri of these things we have to undo. And some of them are really, really deep. Some people's anger and hatred is so deep. Pride is so deep. Arrogance is so deep. Ignorance is so deep. Lust is so deep. Addiction is so deep. We look at all the people we know. How could there just be one thing that could just make everybody all at the same time better? There has to be this idea that the Buddha, being omniscient, teaches in these varying ways. And it isn't a straightforward path the way that we would think they are. Hello, Australia. We have a friend from Australia who has the same name as Khensa Rinpoche gave me, Lobsang Sutrim, when I was thinking of becoming a monk. And all the monks in India at Drepung, they know me as Sutrim. So even if I call Umzala, who's my teacher, who we've been friends for over 20 years, he knew me as Jeff. He just says Sutrim, Sutrim, Sutrim. So yes, so hello, Lobsang Sutrim. Welcome. Wonderful. We're talking about how awesome the Buddha is on Sakardawa and what the excellent qualities of the Buddha's body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities are. And we were looking at the incredible qualities of caring that the Buddha has because of being bound by great compassion, being forced out of great compassion into helping all sentient beings. And that word forced sounds so wrong to you and I, but if you were forced into bliss, I think you'd take it. Because that's what the Buddha gets out of this constant love and compassion for all sentient beings, is that bliss that we get little blips of on the radar, like a flash of lightning in the dark that show us a sign of what could be to come in such a grand way that we've never thought we could experience or never even imagined was experienceable. So this object of observation is all sentient beings for the Buddha, and just has this quality of caring, this love and compassion that just doesn't stop. It says in the praise in 150 verses, the afflictions bind all these beings without exception. You, in order to release them from the afflictions, are eternally bound by compassion. Should I first make obeisance to you or to the great compassion that causes you to dwell for so long in cyclic existence, despite knowing its faults? And this is the non-abiding nirvana that we were talking about. The Buddha doesn't stay in this abiding nirvana. The Buddha has a parinirvana. The Buddha has a non-abiding nirvana where he or she achieves their state for themselves and all beings, has really achieved the needs, has fulfilled the needs of themselves and all sentient beings, because all sentient beings need Buddhas. And the Buddha fulfills his or her needs by becoming perfect, and then fulfills all sentient beings' needs because they need Buddhas. And the Buddha can then, with an omniscient mind, which has as its object of observation all sentient beings and wants them to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, wants them to have happiness and the causes of happiness, and continues to emanate bodies until every single sentient being has achieved the state that he or she has. This is the kind of teacher we're paying homage to on Sakardawa. The supreme sage feels great compassion when he sees beings whose minds are constantly obscured by the dark gloom of ignorance, locked in the prison of cyclic existence. So the Buddha sees all our happiness as the prison of cyclic existence, because it's contaminated happiness within cyclic existence. The conqueror feels great compassion when he sees beings whose minds are overwhelmed by attachment, who have great craving and always long for sensory objects, and who have fallen into the ocean of cravings attachment. The one possessing the 10 powers feels compassion which seeks to dispel all suffering. When he sees the afflictions of beings harmed by a multitude of illnesses and miseries, the sage's great compassion arises constantly. It is impossible for it not to do so. We talk about free will. And this is a question: does the Buddha have free will? Well, I'll let you ponder that, because it's impossible. The sage's compassion arises constantly, spontaneously. It's impossible for it not to do so. The Buddha is free of faults because he is concerned, or she, with the needs of all living beings. So it's important that we know what these qualities that the Buddha possesses are. There's so many times we say we go for refuge, but we don't even know what that means. We don't know what the basis of refuge. What is the Buddha? What is the Dharma? What is the Sangha? What are we really even talking about? We're celebrating Sakardawa. We make momos, or we make cakes and stuff. And then we say, oh, it was so wonderful. Shakyamuni came to this world. Well, what did he do? What did he teach? What is Shakyamuni? Why is he so great? What is Sangye? Woken up from the sleep of ignorance. Open. What does this open mean? It means that the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience aren't there. So the Buddha has a complete, irreversible perfection. Really amazing. And then the Buddha, because of this incredible mind, this incredible love and care for others, because the Buddha has perfect power, has the ability to emanate bodies, Sambhokaya, and the enjoyment bodies and the emanation bodies, and do all of these things for our sakes. So this is what the kind of being we're talking about is. And this is why it says, enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. In Nagarjuna's end of the Mulya Madhyamika Karika, we find this special homage that's made, to Buddha Shakyamuni. And we see that the foundation of Buddha Shakyamuni's activities is compassion. So today or yesterday, whenever His Holiness's message to the world was, today on Sakardawa, I want you to generate bodhicitta and compassion. Think about these things. Generate this mind of compassion and bodhicitta. And why? Because the root of all the Buddha's teachings is compassion. Chandrakirti, in the entrance to the middle way, bows down to compassion. The compassion for sentient beings who turn like buckets on a water wheel because of grasping at the self-grasping ignorance, basically. So the Buddha is someone who has removed the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, has separated those from his or her continuum, and then is a perfect being who can then show us exactly what we need to do. So what did Buddha Shakyamuni then do? So we see in the life, there's so many ways to tell the life story of Buddha Shakyamuni, but we're going to summarize it in a very short way, the way Geshe Dorje Damdula does, which is an incredible way to do it. And it's by relying on Dignaga's Pramana Samuccaya, a quote from the Pramana Samuccaya, the valid cognition, and then the text that Dharmakirti then wrote, the Pramana Vartika Karika, where we find an incredible amount of commentary in the second chapter on this verse that I'm about to read to you. So it says, the one who transformed into a reliable guide. So we see that the Buddha was just like us. The Buddha had all of the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, but the Buddha, like us, had a mind that was empty of intrinsic existence, had Buddha nature, and therefore had the ability to evolve into the state of perfection of all the goodies that we just talked about. So the Buddha didn't just instantaneously become Buddha. The Buddha engaged in the 5 paths: the path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more learning, and the 10 grounds, starting at the path of seeing, the 10 bodhisattva grounds, and got rid of in pure grounds the afflictive obstructions, and then in the pure grounds got rid of the obstructions to omniscience. So there was a transformation that took place. This is not an instantaneous thing that happened. Nobody just gave one quick talk and then the Buddha became a Buddha. The Buddha, through a series of many, many, many lifetimes, transformed. And when we look at the life story of the Buddha, if we look at how the Buddha taught us or how the Buddha transformed, however you want to do it, the Buddha had to transform at some point in time or another, whether it happened, in Bodh Gaya, or it happened before that and he was emanating a show in Bodh Gaya. However you want to look at it, there was a transformation that took place, and the Buddha came to the world to explain how that transformation took place. So it says the one who transformed into a reliable guide. Why a reliable guide? Because the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience are gone. Exactly where we want to go, the Buddha's gotten to. So they are a reliable guide to get us there, just like the example of the person who's done the commute to New York from Connecticut for 50 years. They're a reliable guide to get us to New York, but we're looking for someone to get us to Buddhahood. So we know we need somebody who's been there. So the Buddha went from a state like me, transformed through 5 paths and 10 grounds, into a reliable guide. Reliable, why? Because of perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means, perfect power. Why does he or she have that? Because the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience are gone. There's no longer a subtle self-cherishing attitude that binds them to an abiding nirvana, that disallows them from being the most helpful guides in the universe. So it says, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, motivated by compassion, love and compassion. Altruism is sprung from this great compassion we find in the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, passed down from Buddha to Maitreya and his Sangha. We find this incredible altruism that is brought about by love, great compassion, and then this extraordinary attitude, this altruism that comes about. So if we want to be like Buddha, we need to develop the states of mind that Buddha has developed. It doesn't just happen out of nowhere. There's so many teachings being given today, which are the shortcuts, the quick path, the swift this, the swift that. And if you don't develop calm abiding, you don't develop renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, there's no way the Buddha would have given the shortest path possible to everyone. And everyone thinks, oh, I'm this special person that has this secret teaching and I don't really need to do the work. And that's hogwash. That's just us, our self-cherishing attitude, driven by our self-grasping ignorance, telling us lies in our ears and bringing us, empty-handed things over and over and over again. So the Buddha, motivated by compassion because of knowing exactly what we're going through, because he went through it, out of this altruism to want every single sentient being to be free from suffering, the causes of suffering, and have happiness in the causes of happiness, and not only wants it, but says, I'll take it on myself, this task of doing it. And the Buddha has arrived at a reliable state where he or she can, that he or she transformed into through 5 paths, 10 grounds, etc., through putting in the work. And then it says, the teacher. Why teacher with a capital T? Why the only teacher, the only being who's removed the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience and has taught exactly how to do it? Dharmakirti said, you alone are the teacher of the Four Noble Truths, showed how the truth of suffering is caused by the truth of origin, and the truth of suffering can cease by relying on a path that gets rid of the truth of origin. So you're the teacher. You're the only one who up until then came and presented the truth of suchness that could free all of us. The Sugata, the one gone to bliss, irreversible bliss, perfect bliss, complete forever. Sugata means one gone to bliss, and the highest amount of happiness forever that one's mind can experience. This is where the Buddha is, forever. It's complete, it's perfect, it's irreversible. Wow. Even just saying this, like I'm almost get lost and like, don't even know oh, right, I'm going to give the talk. I can't believe these qualities that I can have. They're all here for me if I want them. And it has to start with that. That sounds like, oh, for me. Well, that's where the Bodhisattva starts. The Bodhisattva started by saying, hey, I can't even fulfill all my needs if I don't follow the Mahayana path. Well, I want to fulfill all my needs. I just said that I want to definitely get out of samsara because I don't like discontent. And now you're telling me I can have even more? It starts with, I can have more? I can be like Buddha? Oh, to be like Buddha, I have to do it for everyone. This is the secret. So, but it starts with, I want to be a Buddha. I want to be like this being. I have fear of cyclic existence. I have fear of blissless states. The Buddha is skilled. The Buddha knows exactly how to get me out of the suffering into the blissful states. I have faith in that. Fear and faith cause refuge. We have to establish the Buddha as the reliable guide if we're going to get anywhere on the path, because if you can't differentiate between what the Buddha came to present and why it's different than what others came to present, then you don't have the four seals. You don't understand all composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. All phenomena are in the nature of emptiness and selflessness. Transcending sorrow, nirvana is peace. This is what makes one a Buddhist tenet holder, a view holder of Buddhism, if you accept this. And the Buddha was the one who came to this world to explain it. And it had never been explained before. And protector, it says. The Buddha's a protector. Protect me from my suffering, is my refuge, is something I can go to and seek shelter from the storm of cyclic existence. I can be sheltered forever. I can be protected forever. If I can generate love for all sentient beings, compassion for all sentient beings, and get rid of this ignorance that sees things incorrectly, blurs things, if I can get rid of this, I get that. And I'm protected by the Buddhist teachings from these things that I don't want. I don't want to be killed. I will be killed again in samsara. Buddha can protect me from that. We think of a protector, protecting us from our wrong ways of thinking. That's what the refuge is. Having fear of cyclic existence. Having fear that the person I love so much has cyclic existence. What to do? And faith that the Buddha knows how to fix it for all of us. Wow, it's so amazing. So what did the Buddha do? So real quickly, and then Dharmakirti wrote, the one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays. To you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. It's just amazing. So the Buddha became enlightened, whether it was before the story of Buddha Shakyamuni and he was emanating, or became enlightened under the Bodhi tree, and then realized this incredible view that was so subtle and that had never, ever been presented before. He discovered something that had never been presented before. And to the show, call it the show, or whatever you like, he then said, I don't know if anybody's going to get this. This is what I've discovered is so different than everything you've ever heard before. I don't know how I'm going to even present this. And now I've realized everyone's lives and my past lives and your past lives. I know everybody's got all this different karma and all these different imprints. What should I say? How should I begin to say it? This is, the Buddha said, profound, peaceful, elaboration free, clear light, non-composite. Such is the nectar-like Dharma I've discovered. Finding no one who can fathom this teaching, in silence, I will retire to the woods. So the Buddha, we just learned, has this incredibly great compassion and wants to free all sentient beings from suffering, but has to have something karmically happen, because the Buddha can't just change reality. Karma's karma. So the gods, luckily, there's some gods that are hanging out and see that there's been a Buddha born. There's a being who's different in the world, and then request the Buddha to teach. So the Buddha stays silent for 49 days. Indra and Brahma come, they offer a conch and a wheel and say, please teach. And then the Buddha turns the wheel of Dharma. So we're just going to talk real quickly about the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. We have about 20 minutes left. Just because it's Sakardawa, it's Buddha Shakyamuni Day, I want to establish, okay, what's so great about Buddha? So that's what I just tried to do. There's so many more sources. I tried to, just at least give you an inkling of an idea of what's different from me. And then if you're anything like me, then you can just be like, oh, yeah, I'm kind of like that guy. That guy said that stuff about the way he's dissatisfied with life and the way that, things go for him. Sounds kind of like me. So then you can be the person that's not the Buddha. And then we talked about the Buddha and we see what a big difference. So, all right, the Buddha's got something to say, clearly important. So what's the Buddha say? So at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha came and he really had to be careful. He had to teach something that was just like a step up, a step into the path to the Buddhahood, because the world had never heard things like this before. The Buddha couldn't come out of the gate with, this is ultimate truth and things are a projection of your mind, but they externally exist. That he needed it to make sense to the people he was talking to, and he knew what their imprints were exactly. So he knew the audience. So the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, he taught the Four Noble Truths in Varanasi and Sarnath. And the main audience were if we look at from a tenet system point of view, were the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika followers. And the Buddha taught that this is the superior truth of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, and this is the superior truth of path. Suffering is to be identified. He made 4 statements, then he made 4 more. He said suffering is to be identified, origin is to be abandoned, cessation is to be achieved, and path is to be meditated upon. Then he made a really peculiar set of statements. He said, but there is no suffering to identify, there is no origin to abandon, there is no cessation to achieve, and there is no path to rely upon. And according to, okay, so let's just leave it at that for now. So those practitioners at that wheel of Dharma came to understand that, okay, once I become a being who's in nirvana, according to Buddha, once I'm ejected from samsara, there's no suffering to identify. There's no origin to abandon. There's no cessation to achieve. It's done. There's no path to meditate on. So at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Sautrantika Vaibhashika school interpretation is that that's what the Buddha meant. And the Buddha stated that the Four Noble Truths are truly existent, and didn't teach that all phenomena lack true existence. Taught that, there was this I, there was a selflessness of, there was not a permanent unitary independent self. There wasn't this self that had autonomous substantial reality of person. But the Buddha didn't go further. The Buddha didn't get into the rest of it. The Buddha talked about the person. The Buddha talked about impermanence. The Buddha talked about that, hey, most of the things that we think that are permanent are impermanent. And the ways that we think of as things that are happiness are suffering. And the things that we think are pure are impure. And the things that we think have a self don't have a self. So the Buddha started at very basic levels of explaining suffering, pointing out the ways that things make sense to us. The way I'm kind of explaining it, this kind of makes sense to you. I hope, I think it does. It makes sense that we're experiencing these sufferings. So the Buddha, gave the tip of the understanding in the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And this is what he said, primarily for those schools. Second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, the Heart Sutra, and taught that nothing in the universe, no phenomena, inherently exists. And this was different. The Buddha said that some things had intrinsic existence. Some things were established by way of their own character at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And this was revolutionary. But the intended audience were those who had the imprints and the capacity to understand the final view of emptiness. And those were the Madhyamaka Prasangika view kind of participants, those people who could handle the final view. And the final view of emptiness is the Prasangika view. So let's just leave it at that for there. And explicitly, the Buddha taught the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, the lack of defining, the lack of things being established by way of their own character, existing, in the object inherently. The Buddha said there's nothing that has that explicitly. And then implicitly, the Buddha taught about the 5 paths, taught about the bodhisattva path, the path of accumulation where one gets bodhicitta, and enters the Mahayana, and then path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, and path of no more learning. So implicitly within the perfection of wisdom Heart Sutra, we see this. And we also find contained within that small sutra, the 100,000 verse, 20,000 verse, 25,000 verse, 20,000 verse, 8,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. And we also find the most condensed Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in this condensed Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, the syllable Ah. So just the syllable Ah is the shortest Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So it's also contained in there in a backwards way. It's more, the Heart Sutra actually explains Ah, but the Heart Sutra is very condensed in comparison to the 100,000 verse Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So the intent was for the Buddha to teach the non-interpretable teachings at this point. Second turning of the wheel of Dharma with the definitive teachings. The Buddha meant it. The Buddha wasn't kidding around. The Buddha meant that no phenomena has inherent existence, but phenomena exist. You have to be able to say phenomena exist, but do they exist inherently? The Buddha says no. The Buddha says that things exist, but the Buddha said they don't exist inherently. So the object of negation, when we look at the self of person and self of phenomena, is not the self. It's a certain way the self is existing. And that's important when we say selflessness. People think no self. There's this absence thing that means I don't exist. And then I just figure out I don't exist and then problem solved. No, the Buddha has a self. The Buddha is emanate. I'm telling you, the Buddha is doing all of this stuff. You can't possibly think that something that doesn't exist is doing stuff. So you have to find out what Buddha meant by emptiness. And that's what the second turning of the wheel of Dharma was about. And the Buddha was scared to death at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. The Buddha's not scared, but you know what I mean. From an imprint's perspective, knew that folks would misinterpret emptiness and think things don't exist, and then wouldn't be able to posit karma and wouldn't think anything mattered, and then would be lost in samsara. So the Dalai Lama says, if you have a choice between nihilism and believing things inherently exist, go with believing things inherently exist, because then karma works. Then you don't get stuck into nihilistic views that really are the main downfalls, that we believe things that don't exist, and we believe things that exist don't exist. These nihilistic views are very, very dangerous. So the Buddha was very, very careful, and we have to be very careful when we're talking to folks about Buddhism, and make sure emptiness isn't so dangerous if you could explain it in a way that's not dangerous. But you have to start with things exist. Absolutely, things exist. The self exists. Whoa, that's a weird thing for a Buddhist guy to say. Self exists. But if you know what Buddha meant, you know the self exists. The self doesn't inherently exist. The self doesn't stand on its own. The self isn't able to be found within its parts or outside of its parts. I had some fun with that the other day with Geshe Dorje Damdula. I had some canned answers for him that he didn't really appreciate after his next question, and I didn't really appreciate his next question. But it made me open all of my books up, and really, this is what we do. We refine our views. And once we know what the object of negation is, we see emptiness. We know emptiness. So I don't have that luxury right now. So I have to just keep digging and keep digging. And our teachers teach us the truth of suchness, because they can't free us. They can do nothing but be like, hey, you see how you're wrong there, and you see how you're leaning into something truly existing in your mind, even though you don't think you are. And then it gets refined and it gets cleaned up. Second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha gave the whole show. Then the third turning of the wheel of Dharma in Vaishali, a group of 10th level bodhisattvas get up and ask Buddha a bunch of questions. And this is where Buddha nature is taught. And this is also where the Buddha teaches the Chittamantran view. So the group the Buddha is teaching to at this third turning of the wheel of Dharma, in terms of intended audience, and I'm going to get to the points, in those that he intends to think this is literal, are the Chittamantran school, the mind-only school followers. So he taught about Buddha nature, and he taught about the mind possessing this Buddha within it already, and that we just needed to remove the dirt. And that the mind-only school then adapted this idea that the mind truly exists and that everything's the nature of the mind, and that just the imputed nature is what the Buddha was talking about at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, just imputed nature, not talking about the mind or anything. So at the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha, for Bodhisattva Paramatsamugata, gets up and asks a bunch of questions to the Buddha about these contradictions in the teachings. And the Buddha, we see mainly in the Sutra Unraveling Thought and so forth, we find these Buddha answering these questions according to the mind-only view. So what to do? We've got the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. Is that important if we're smart? We've got the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. Do I only need that because I think I'm really smart? And then we've got the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, which seemed to be a little smarter than the first, but isn't as smart as the second, according to what Prasangika says. So what is this all about? According to Madhyamaka Prasangika, the definitive teaching is the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And any teaching that teaches ultimate truth is the definitive teaching. And then the first turning of the wheel of Dharma and the third turning of the wheel of Dharma were teachings that required interpretation, but were not to be cast aside. We find the teaching on Buddha nature in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, and it has to be interpreted as the emptiness of our mind, as being the natural Buddha nature. It was taught like, oh, you have a Buddha with 32 major marks and 80 minor marks inside of you, hiding out, ready to go, ta-da, svabhavata, just hop out. But this gave confidence to practitioners and allowed for this mind-only view, which was so subtle, so much more subtle than things externally truly existing, that was taught at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. So the Buddha taught in all of these varying ways because participants at the teachings had various different aptitudes. And the Buddha walked around villages and marketplaces and told stories and talked to people about the Four Noble Truths, not at the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, and talked to people about Buddha nature, not at the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. It was in somebody's kitchen having lunch and said, hey, we have this mind that's in the nature of clear light and unsullied. But we categorize them as these three specific turnings of the wheel of Dharma. And the intended audiences are first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Four Noble Truths, Vaibhashika and Sautrantika school, second turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Heart Sutra, the Madhyamaka school, specifically the Madhyamaka Prasangika school, but Madhyamaka can be broken up into Prasangika and Svatantrika. And Prasangika is the higher of the view. So we say that the Buddha was teaching Prasangika at the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And then the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, the intended audience is the mind-only school. So we see all four tenet systems presented in the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. And we see it, Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life is a summary of all three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. So this is another fact that you can look into. But this is a very special text. And I've been studying now with Umsala Geshe Aga. And he's teaching me a 600-page commentary by His Holiness on Shantideva's text. And it's very intricate and very beautiful, and I will share it with you when I can. So these were the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma that the Buddha taught for the intended audiences. And we have to pay attention to everything that the Buddha taught. We have to take this as a staircase to our own ability to become a Buddha. The Buddha taught in this way for a reason. And we need to be able to clean out what means what in terms of definitive and interpretive, because if we don't, the Buddha said some pretty outrageous things. The Buddha was talking about renunciation. It depends on how you hear the story, but and said, kill your mother. The Buddha didn't mean, the Buddha's the first thing to abstain from in the 10 non-virtues is killing. The Buddha meant like this idea that this is your home, this idea that this is your only life, this idea that the things are the way that they appear, and that you should definitely want to emerge the householder life. The Buddha was talking to monks. It was talking about this idea of emerging from this, this family life, something like this. So we have to make sure that we know what the Buddha was talking about when the Buddha was talking about it. And our gauge is, by looking at the tenet systems, Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamantra, Madhyamaka tenet systems, and then seeing what's what. And what's amazing is that the Buddha came to this world to teach us these things out of love and compassion. The Buddha doesn't dwell in either of the extremes. The Buddha doesn't dwell in the extreme of peace, nor does he dwell in the extreme of an abiding nirvana. And that's what we're so lucky to have had happen, that Buddha came in this world and showed us exactly what we need to do to get everything we've ever wanted. And that's the being we celebrate today. And that's the way we celebrate it, is by talking about the excellent qualities, so that we then say, man, I want to become like this being. The more we hear about excellent qualities and familiarize ourselves with the potential for ourselves to have these excellent qualities, the more we have the joyous effort that we put into the path, into the practice, because we've found out that for once in our lives, we're going to do some stuff that produces what it's supposed to. We all day do things, and it never produces exactly the perfect thing that we came up with in our mind that it was supposed to produce. And we become satisfied with similitude of it. We're like, oh, okay, that was, close enough to our expectation, but nothing's ever, think about it, has anything ever completely, you can't say one little thing, there isn't anything there that didn't meet your expectation in the time, and if you could say, well, there was a moment, what moment was that within the, million moments in a second, which everything's moving like this fast, as we're moving towards our death. Really, it's all so true. And Buddha came and told us the truth. And these holy beings like Khenso Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and Geshe Lobsang Gompo and Demolocha Rinpoche and Khenso Lobsang Gyatso and Umsla Aga and Geshe Dorje Damdu and Jeffrey Hopkins, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, these kind beings who we've been able to be in contact with. We've been able to actually see in front of us and witness the way a bodhisattva actually is in terms of Khenso Geshe Wandak. One of the, and this is, I'm going to have to end in a moment, but one of the things at the end of Rinpoche's life, I was saying to him, we were alone in a room, and I knew that was it. It was it. And it wasn't, things weren't good. And I said to him, how amazing it is that all of these healthcare workers and all of these doctors and all of these people cleaning the room and actually got to lay eyes on an Arya Bodhisattva. And he looked me right in the eye and he just said, yes. I have, like, my whole body, just hairs just raised. He just looked me in the eye and said, yeah. And it wasn't for like, and then stopped. It was a long looking me in the eyes like, you got it. And I said, you'll always and have always been on my crown. And he said, I know. And he went like this. These are the kind beings that come into our world and show us what they did to become who they are. And they have nothing else to show us. Rinpoche didn't have anything else to offer us. He was my greatest friend ever, and the only thing he had to offer me was what he told me how to do about my own mind. He wasn't a great conversationalist, barely knew about me. I played guitar for him once. He told me to sell it. But he was the greatest friend. And before Buddhism, music was the most important thing in the world to me. And he was the greatest friend I've ever known or could ever know. Why? Because I never had a friend who cared about me so much to teach me exactly what I needed to know to get what I want. I've never had a friend who knew how to even begin to show me how to not suffer, how to have the bliss that I was chasing after in all kinds of really screwed up ways. I never had a friend who could tell me how to do that. And then I met a friend in 1997 who gave me the universe, who told me exactly how to become just like Buddha Shakyamuni. He left nothing out. There's nothing more renunciation, bodhicitta, the correct view of emptiness, a calm mind. There's nothing more that we can do to our minds than make those things happen. The union of bliss and emptiness, to make that happen. To somehow find this beautiful mind we have right now, this clear light mind, this deep down, fourth level, way down their mind that right now isn't grasping at anything, has no fear. Our mind just knows and reflects and illuminates what it's reflecting and knowing. That's it. And Khyentse Geshe Wandak gave us these tools. The Buddha gave us these tools to figure out how to make our minds only reflect bliss, love, compassion, and to only discriminate sentient beings as, I love you so much. Every being. This I love you all so much, this feeling that someone like Rinpoche had because he discriminated everything so differently than me, but taught me exactly how to discriminate things the way he does. And if I keep practicing, I can one day be at the end of my life and it won't matter. It just won't matter because I will have never, ever again have to have an end of a life unless I emanate one for the sake of others. That's amazing. And that's what Buddha Shakyamuni brings to our world. And beings like Rinpoche emanate, who are Buddhas, to show us about our own minds. Our own minds are so beautiful. If we just figure out how to get to that part and remove the afflictive obstructions, the obstructions to omniscience, get rid of this thing that thinks that I'm the most important thing in the world because I inherently exist. So with that being said, let's do some dedication. A little odd format this evening, but that's okay. And this is what, when Rinpoche asked me to teach, I knew I didn't have a Geshe Larampa degree. I'm not an idiot. I knew that I didn't spend 25 years, 7 days a week, ripping this material apart in such a way that a Geshe Larampa did. But what I do know, and what I thought, oh, maybe I do have this to offer, is that a lot of people were saying, wow, Rinpoche taught all this technical stuff, but he never really taught us how to meditate or how to practice. And that to me was like a flash of lightning in my heart, not in the dark. And this is my mission, because Rinpoche sat next to me and taught me about the Lam Rim. And I have been practicing it. I've been practicing it in bad times. I was practicing it. In good times, I was practicing it. And Rinpoche taught me how to, in bad times, practice it. How to have my life falling apart, standing over a pizza paddle, making a pizza, and thinking about, is this inherently existent? Am I a maker? Is the pizza there if there's no maker? Is the pizza dependent on the maker? If I make this really, really good, people will enjoy it. I want them to have happiness. I want their suffering of hunger to be free. I want everyone to understand this is how you practice the Lam Rim. I'm not trying to make myself into something that I'm not, because I'm not a bodhisattva. I don't have renunciation. I don't have shamatha. I haven't seen emptiness. But I've had enough of these teachings, had enough of an effect on my mind that I know they work. And I've been practicing them because when Rinpoche came right away, he said to us, these are instructions to practice. First teaching he ever gave. And I took him seriously. And he also told me it doesn't go from the path of accumulation to no more learning, and that I was going to be a work in progress. But if I didn't do the work, there'd be no progress. And that when everything was going crazy, okay, just I'll see you Sunday. Wow, things are a wreck. Everything's just falling apart, and I can't believe my mind works like this. Yeah, everybody's mind works really screwed up and does really screwed up things. And everybody does things they wish they hadn't done. See you next week. See you next week, or see you next time. And that was my process. And I believed him. I believed this evolution was what it would be. I never got so down on myself that I thought I'm worthless, because Rinpoche told me I wasn't. Over and over again. I tried to get him to buy into it, but he wouldn't let me. Why? Because he was enthused by great compassion to teach the immaculate Dharma, to dispel all perverted views, just like the Buddha Gautama. And that's why we pay homage to our teacher, who's inseparable from the Buddha. Because our teacher is the one who came here to tell us what the Buddha said and won't mess it up. So it's almost more kind than the Buddha in some cases. But we know the ultimate kindness is the Buddha, who came here to enable this teacher to be able to say the things that they say to us, to make our minds evolve. And they do. Boy, do they. Boy, do they. And your meditation, if you get on a cushion every day, if you do practice every day, your mind, you're going to start to see your mind doesn't work the way that it did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, coming up on 30 years now. I started studying in 95 before I met Rinpoche. It's a long time to only get this far, but is it? Since beginningless time, I haven't really made much progress. And now I have a little bit of a taste of what the Buddha was talking about, and it's delicious. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I've collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. May we always be protected by Paul the Lamo, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jojo Rama, Tunjo Kalaraja Mo Ramo, Ajadaja Tunjo Rula Rula Hong Jo. Oh. Any mistakes that I've made in my presentation tonight about Buddha Shakyamuni, I apologize if there were problems in my presentation, and I didn't do that on purpose. And if there were, may they be purified by this Vajrasattva mantra. Om Benza Sato Samayamina Palai Benza Sato Sena Vajidadida Meva, Zulugai Meva, Zubugai Meva, Anuragta Meva, Savazeri Mebraja, Savakamazuchime, Kitem Trium Kuruhum, Ha, Bhagavad Zavatata Kata, Benza Mame Muka, Benza Baba, Maha, Samaya Sapa, Om, Hey. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. May he remain in this world and continue to turn the pure wheel of Dharma, and continue to engage in all of the enlightened activities that he engages in out of his mind that cares for others, and the perfect wisdom of reality and diversity. So really, we need to know our stuff, and then we can appreciate what we have so much more. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. Why is he a source of all benefit and happiness? Because the Buddhas come to teach the truth of suchness. The Buddhas have realized their needs and all sentient beings' needs. Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha of compassion, has realized all of his needs, so therefore has realized all sentient beings' needs, because what do sentient beings need? We need Buddhas to be able to teach us the truth of suchness, to be able to transform our own minds into the same kind of mind that Avalokiteshvara has, the Dalai Lama has. Really amazing. And prayer of supplication to Nangyal Khyentse Geshe Wandak, our precious teacher. I'm sorry if I harp on Khyentse Geshe, talk about him so much, but blame Milarepa, because Milarepa always mentions Marpa Lotsawa at the beginning of all of his songs and pays homage to his teacher, because we find that the foundation of all of our good qualities is the teacher. I would be nothing. Really, I have a chance to not die ordinary, just regular. I have a chance to be something more than a blip on the radar to all sentient beings. Wow. I could just keep bumping into all of you, or I could somehow have bliss and show you all how to. Wow. This is for Rinpoche. I started writing this when I met him. It was going to be a long life prayer. And then people thought it was quite long. It was about half this long, and we made a really short one for him. And I held on to it for 25 years. And then the anniversary of his passing, on that day, I finished it as a supplication, so that anyone who's watching or new, I wrote this. I cribbed, as Jeffrey Hopkins would say. I guess that's stealing some of the Buddha's words and just some points. But if you're not cribbing, you're not talking Buddha. I better not be making anything original up, because all the paths lead to one point, and that's to the Buddha's realization of perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means, perfect wisdom, perfect power, all of those perfects. The perfect foe destroyer. Why the perfect foe destroyer? Because he or she has destroyed the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, whereas the other foe destroyer has not. Only the afflictive obstructions are gone, and therefore they are stuck in an extreme of peace, whereas the Buddha is neither in the extreme of peace or samsara and dwells in bliss. Homage to Khyentse Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible, to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music, purified by Om, 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 Om. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now the sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. Rinpoche actually told, this is a quote, Rinpoche saying to me, in this room I'm sitting in, he was in a chair right there, and he had a tear in his eye, and he said, Ninji, all my teachers died too, Khenser Pema Jetson, and started to list them. And I thought, wow, he really cared about his teachers. He wasn't, I didn't catch that he was letting me know it's okay. The Buddha does not wash the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. Sadness in our hearts would be way too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you can implement these teachings. I hope you feel this gratitude that I feel for Shakyamuni, and the gratitude that I have for having this life of leisure and most of the opportunities in my palm right now. I have them here right now, and we don't know when we're going to have them again, and we're going to die. Death will come, nothing can stop it. We don't know when we're going to die. And the only thing that can help is Dharma. And the only thing that Dharma does is tame our mind. And if it's not taming our mind, it's not Dharma. And if your mind isn't being tamed by what you're practicing, what you're studying, find something new to practice and study, because it's not Dharma if it's not taming your mind. Thank you. See ya. Have a great week, everybody. Thank you.